This utility e-bike is the Troxus Lynx Plus, which is kind of a fun-size fat tire bike. So what makes it different from the full-size models we've tested, and who do we think this is good for? Let's take a ride and find out. Welcome to Electric Bike Report, I'm John. I had a lot of fun testing this bike, so I'm really stoked to get into this review, but I've got a couple quick requests before we jump in. First, if you're looking for extremely detailed and data-driven e-bike reviews, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're on our way to 100,000 subscribers, so if you've signed up already, thanks for helping us move toward that milestone. But second, we're known for our in-depth, real-world testing of every e-bike, and our process takes a ton of time and effort. If we're able to help you in your buying decision, please help us in return by using our affiliate link in the video description. Our channel is supported by commissions, so using that link is a great way to thank us without increasing the cost of the bike. But now on to the Lynx Plus. Let's start off by talking about some of the bike's highlights, and then we'll cover its specs before moving on to our standardized test sections and the bike's results. First, I'll answer one of my opening questions. We like full-size fat tire bikes for their stability and their really solid feel, but they're usually not the most agile bikes out there. The Lynx Plus felt just as stable as a full-size model thanks to its 4-inch wide tires, but with its small 20-inch wheels, it felt a lot more nimble and playful in comparison. Combined with a surprisingly punchy 750-watt rear hub motor, I thought this bike had a huge fun factor. I used to ride BMX when I was younger, and the Lynx reminded me of that style of bike, just a lot faster and more powerful. On top of that, the Lynx Plus gave us really awesome results in our range test. We'll talk about the specifics of that later, but the bike includes a gigantic 48-volt, 960 watt-hour battery that's fully integrated into the underside of its down tube. This capacity is well above average for fat tire bikes, so the Lynx is able to go longer distances and times between charges than many of its peers. One last highlight of this bike is a feature we haven't seen in too many other places so far. That's the ability to switch between torque and cadence sensing modes, which totally changes the feel of the ride. I tend to prefer a more active and natural pedaling experience, so I stuck primarily with the torque mode, but if you want a more relaxed experience with more granular control over your speeds, the cadence mode might fit better for you. To run through the rest of the Lynx Plus's specs, it has an 8-speed Shimano Altus drivetrain with a 46-tooth chainring and a 12 to 32-tooth cassette. For brakes, it uses the Tektro E3520 hydraulic disc system with 2 piston calipers paired with a 180mm rotor on the front wheel and a 160mm rotor on the back. The bike includes a suspension fork with 80mm of travel made by YDH. It has knobby fat tires made by Kenda. The saddle is custom with a handle to help you move the bike around, and it also has front and rear alloy fenders. As a utility bike, the Lynx also has a beefed up cargo rack with a wooden top deck that can hold up to 100 pounds. It has an integrated headlight and a tail light beneath the cargo rack with brake lights as well as turn signals. And then to finish things up in the cockpit, we have a set of 680mm BMX style riser bars with ergonomic rubber grips. There's a Shimano trigger shifter on the right handlebar, a throttle lever and a large control panel are on the left, and then there's a color LED display in the center. A couple of final details, the Lynx Plus weighs in at a pretty beefy 79.5 pounds. It ships as a Class 2 e-bike with throttle and pedal assist up to 20 miles per hour, but it can be unlocked to a Class 3. Its battery is UL 2271 certified. It has a total payload capacity of up to 400 pounds, including the rider, and it comes in 3 color options. So we have charcoal, but there's also dusk blue and my personal favorite, metallic red. So that should cover all the basics. Let's jump into our test sections next and see how the Lynx Plus performed. First up, we'll talk about the Lynx Plus's stopping ability. We measured the performance of its hydraulic disc brake system in our brake test by pedaling up to 20 miles per hour, hitting the brakes at a designated line, and measuring how far the bike traveled before stopping. Its average result after 3 tests was 20 feet and 4 inches, which is just slightly better than average for the utility bike category. Right now, that number is 2 inches longer at 20 feet 6 inches. We consider anything in this range to be an excellent result, and this style of bike tends to do a pretty solid job in this test. The Lynx Plus is actually a little on the heavy side for this category, so we chalk its good performance up to the fact that most of the bike's weight is kept really low, so it can't really shift too far forward once the brakes are applied. Overall, we're really happy with its results, so I think it's safe to say that the Lynx is spec'd well with really good brakes. Our second standardized test is the speed test, which I personally performed out on the bike paths. This one got a little complicated, so I tested the bike speeds in all 5 of its pedal assist settings, using both its torque and cadence sensing modes, and I also tested it in both its Class 2 and Class 3 settings. On top of that, I tested the throttle to show off the bike's acceleration, so let's go see how the throttle and the torque mode pedal tests went, and then we'll talk about all of the results back here in the studio. All right, and we're here to do a speed test with the Lynx Plus. So we're gonna do a few different tests here, actually, both a Class 2 and a Class 3 in both the torque and cadence sensing modes. So to start things off, we'll do the Class 2 torque sensing mode test here, going around 9 miles an hour to start with no pedal assist. But let's go ahead and go up to PAS 1. And I know there's a little bit of wind here, but hopefully that's not going to get in the way too much. Let's go ahead and go up to 5th gear. So that motor came to life, making a, little low hum, but making a big difference in speed. So we're going up to 12 miles an hour here in PAS 1. Let's go ahead and go up to the second setting. All right, we'll shift up to 6th gear. So I don't know if you can tell, but I'm kind of getting like an extra push kind of at the bottom of my pedal stroke. It's fairly subtle, but it is there. So we're going up to around 14.5 miles per hour here in PAS 2. Let's go up to 3 on your left. All right, up to 7th gear and about 16.5 miles per hour. Let's go up to PAS 4 and 8th gear. Definitely feeling like I'm hauling right now, but not putting in, anything more than kind of a moderate level of effort. We're going about 18.5, 19 miles an hour, depending on the wind. And then let's finish things off in PAS 5. All right, seems like we're going, kind of about 19.5, a little bit of a headwind. And all right, we'll call it there. All right, so we are back for a Class 3 test using the torque sensor. And let's see, kind of starting off in PAS 1, around 12.5 miles per hour. Wind is getting a little bit stronger, but we'll see what we can do here. If I have to give it a little bit more effort, I will do that. But yeah, it seems to be right around kind of 12.5 miles per hour for this setting. Let's go ahead and go up to PAS 2. Honestly, almost feels like a little jerky sometimes with the torque sensor, kind of where it engages. I don't know, we'll see. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, I think. So With PAS2, we are landing at around 15.5 miles per hour. Yeah, let's go up to PAS3. And shift up to 8th gear here. Wow. Yeah, fair amount of wind. All right, we are up to around 19.5 maybe, as long as the wind is not blowing. And then let's go up to PAS4. We are speeding up to about 20.5, maybe 21 miles an hour. And then, yeah, we'll finish things off in PAS5. Again, I'm really trying to keep my cadence consistent here as well. It's like my pace and the amount of pressure that I'm applying. So, let's see. Right up to around 22 miles an hour. 22.5, all right. And then just for fun, let me see what happens when I really put some pedal effort in. We are up to 27. Yeah, 26.5, 27. So, okay. We will call that our torque sensor test in class 3 mode. All right. Last thing here is checking out the throttle to see how quickly it accelerates. Let's go ahead and go from 0 to 20, and we'll start in 3, 2, 1, go. Whoa, bit of a kick there. All right, picking up very fast. And 19.6 seems to be about the max there. All right, we'll call it there. We decided to not show the cadence mode tests because there really wasn't much difference between them except in PAS5. It's worth pointing out that when using that mode, the bike's motor will stop giving you power at increasingly higher speeds as you step up through the assist settings, whereas if you're using the torque mode, your speeds aren't really limited except by how hard you pedal. So to recap the numbers from the class 2 torque sensor test, I kicked things off by pedaling with no assistance from the motor at 8.8 miles per hour. I hit 12 miles per hour in PAS1, 14.5 in PAS2, 16.5 in PAS3, 18.8 miles per hour in PAS4, and 19.3 in PAS5. In the class 3 test, my numbers went up across the board. PAS1 gave me 12.5 miles per hour, PAS2 went up to 15.5, and then I hit 19.2 in PAS3, 20.7 in PAS4, and 22.4 miles per hour in PAS5, with a maximum speed of 27 miles per hour with more intense pedal effort. When looking at that data in a graph, we're typically looking for an angled line that shows even jumps in speed between settings, and the Lynx did a pretty decent job in both modes. In the torque mode tests, the bike got a little cramped in PAS5 in the class 2 test because of that 20 mile per hour speed limit, but the class 3 results are pretty close to ideal, and I think the slightly higher than expected speed in PAS3 was probably just due to differences in my pedaling. In the cadence mode tests, the bike looked great in the class 2 test, but we expected there to be a different profile in the class 3 test with higher speeds across the board instead of just in PAS5. You could see in the throttle test that this thing surprised me a little with its power. I don't think it happened there specifically, but there were a few times on the bike where it actually popped a wheelie when I hit the throttle. If you're like me and you enjoy that sort of punchy and powerful feel, I think you'll be happy with what the Lynx Plus has to offer. I definitely had a lot of fun. I talked about how well the Lynx Plus did in our range test at the start of this review, so let's dive into those results and actually see what happened. We tested the bike twice by riding on our local bike paths until the battery was totally empty, once using PAS5, again using PAS1, and both times using the bike's torque sensing mode and a class 2 top speed. This method gave us a minimum range of 54.2 miles and a maximum of 85.8 miles, both of which are well above average when compared with other utility e-bikes we've tested, and we're not talking 10 or 15 miles here. In the PAS 5 test, the Lynx Plus went 22.7 miles over the average, and in the PAS 1 test, it went 29.6 miles over the average, making it one of the best performing bikes in this category that we've tested. So, as I mentioned earlier, this bike's huge 960 watt-hour battery definitely helped out with that, but its torque sensor is also likely another contributing factor. In the cadence sensing mode, the motor puts out a constant flow of power, but in the torque sensing mode, the motor output fluctuates based on how hard you pedal, which usually ends up being more efficient. There's really not much else to say here. This bike did a fantastic job, and its results mean that you can probably take a few really long rides or a bunch of shorter ones without having to recharge the bike. For perspective, our high assist test took about 3.5 hours, while our low power test lasted almost 8, so we expect most riders will land somewhere in the middle. Our last test section is our fan favorite, the hill test, at a place called Hellhole Trail. We chose this hill because it's not something you'd want to pedal up on a regular bike. The path is paved, but it's 1/3 of a mile long and has a 12% average grade. I'm going to pass you off to Justin for this one. He tested the Lynx Plus's throttle and pedal assist system in PAS 5.
We are out testing the Troxus Lynx Plus on Hellhole. This is the throttle test. I'll say right off the bat, the throttle felt really punchy. So curious to see how this does as we get some incline. So far feeling fairly strong. We're at about 11 miles per hour through the steep section, 11.6. Kind of holding right there. 10.3. Sorry, I said 11.6, meant 10.6. Down to about 10.2. And from the motor standpoint, I'd say it's kind of right about average, maybe slightly above average in terms of the noise. You do hear that whine. I'll let you listen to it through this section here. So yeah, it still feels like it's definitely given some good kick to this. I think the score is going to be fairly decent. And you hear that in the motor. You hear it working. You hear that whine. I would not say it's like horrible, but it is a little bit louder than average, I would say. And power-wise, feels really powerful. Again, we'll see as we finish up here. We go to the tape and we'll see how it does. We'll turn around and do the pedal test. We are back out on the Troxus Lynx Plus on the pedal test, and similar to kind of the throttle, the motor does feel fairly powerful. I am just really kind of soft pedaling here. And through this first section, 12.6, 12.0, and 8, I'm gonna shift down. Holding right around 11 miles per hour, 10.9. It does feel a little bit like I've got to put a little bit of pressure on the pedals. And it does give me a little bit more if I do so. I'll let you listen to the motor through this next section here. So kind of held right at 11.5, 12 miles per hour through there. Felt pretty good. So we'll see what the results are. It feels fairly natural climbing. There's a slight kind of push and pull with the motor. So if I pedal at a constant rate, it feels a little better. We'll see if that affects the results. We'll go to the tape.
Clearly, the Lynx Plus didn't have any trouble there. Justin finished the throttle test in 1 minute and 21 seconds at an average speed of 13.4 miles per hour. His pedal test was almost identical, so his time was 1 minute and 22 seconds at 13.2 miles per hour. This one was interesting because of the similarity there, but also because of how the Lynx compared with other utility bikes we've tested. So with that super punchy throttle, it finished 3 seconds faster than average in that portion of the test, but when pedaling, it was 5 seconds slower than average. I initially thought that might be related to the fact that we tested using the torque sensing mode. So I tried the bike out at our secondary test location called Pilot Hill and got the same results in both modes. So I think weight is probably the main contributing factor. At roughly 80 pounds, this bike is heavier than average for the utility e-bike category, and I think that its size can be deceiving. It's not as big and bulky as your average full-size fat tire e-bike, but it does weigh about the same. So do keep that in mind if you'll need to lift or transport your bike regularly. Realistically though, the Lynx Plus had great hill test results, which showed that it can handle some pretty extreme situations without really breaking a sweat. Between its two sensor modes and the throttle, it also gives you plenty of options for how you want to approach hills. If you want the easiest possible experience, you can go with the throttle. If you want to pedal actively, you can pedal in the torque mode. And then if you want something kind of in the middle, you can set it to the cadence sensing mode. There are tons of factors that influence what a bike feels like to ride, and we lump all those things together under the umbrella of ride quality. Let's hit the bike paths one more time with the Lynx Plus and talk about the basics, and then I'll see you back here to wrap things up.
All right, so let's talk about ride quality here on the Lynx Plus. This is Troxus's, utility bike, which is sort of a mini fat tire e-bike, or I guess also sort of a chunky step through BMX. The riding position, at least where I have things set right now, is it is a little bit of a forward lean, but depending on where you have things set or your height in general, it might be a little bit more upright or a little bit more forward leaning. So there's a single frame size that there's no sort of specified height range for. Troxus says it should fit most riders, and honestly that seems pretty accurate. I'm 5'11", I've got about a 31-inch inseam, and where I have things set, I've got good leg extension. I've got, like I said, a little bit of forward lean, and there's definitely room in the saddle with the long seat post for, somebody who's a little bit taller than I am, maybe a few inches for sure. So that's one adjustment point. Then you also have the stem. So we have a standard threadless stem paired with these BMX style riser bars. And by loosening up that stem, you can change the angle of these handlebars, which will then affect your reach. And I guess to some degree, your handlebar height just by the arc of rotation there. But anyway, let's see, we have a suspension fork up front with 80 millimeters of travel that is helping to soften the ride a bit. We also have the 20-inch by 4-inch Kenda fat tires with a knobby tread pattern. So those are, well, if I aired them down a little bit, they would be, adding a bit more cushion to the ride as well on top of what the suspension fork is doing. But another thing, that sort of combination of the fork and tires gives you some flexibility in where you can ride both on paved or unpaved surfaces. And then the wheel size, 20 inches in diameter, just kind of helps to make this bike feel pretty nimble and maneuverable, pretty quick all around. And then we have a 750 watt hub motor with both a torque and cadence sensor that you can switch between depending on your preferences or the environment that you're riding in. So right now we're in the torque sensing mode, so as you can see, like as I pedal harder, getting a little bit more from the motor, you can hear that. And then if I switch to the cadence sensing mode, all I have to do is hold the plus button, and then there's a little diagram of a rider on a bike that pops up. So now here, let's bump up to PAS3. All I have to do is just turn the pedals. I don't really even have to apply any pressure, but I'm gonna go up to speed and the bike will keep me there as long as I'm moving. Again, with no real effort. So I really like this setup. I think this is great that you can switch between the two modes. You might stick with the torque sensing mode if you want something that feels a little bit more responsive and natural, more like you're riding a regular bike. That'll also extend your range a little bit more, or it should, depending on how you pedal. But the cadence mode that we're in now, you know, you might prefer that if you want a little bit easier control over your speed. So, you know, right now I could bump down to PAS1, and now even though I'm turning the cranks, I'm not really getting any extra speed. It's gonna bring me back down to the limit of PAS1. But then also, you know, if I were tackling some steep hills, I'd probably put it in cadence mode in PAS5 and let the bike just, you know, carry me uphill. So in any case, let's wrap it up there. We'll bounce back to the studio and talk a little bit more.
So I think the bike's size, power, and quick handling are really the main things to focus on when it comes to ride quality. I had a blast on this bike. It was a lot of fun to zip around on, and I really liked a lot of its features. Touching back on the bike's unspecified height range, I had our shortest and tallest reviewers hop on the Lynx to make sure it was comfortable. So first was Sydney, who is 5 feet tall. She put the saddle pretty far down and was able to find a really comfortable position, and there was room to lower the saddle even more for someone shorter. On the opposite side of the spectrum was Matthew at 6'5", who liked the feel of the bike and had fun throttling around, but wasn't quite able to get full leg extension. With that in mind, there might be some limitations for tall folks, but I still think Troxus's claim that this bike should fit most riders is pretty accurate. I was really excited that this bike had the ability to switch between torque and cadence sensing modes, and I think it worked relatively well, but I did think this was one area with some room for improvement. As I mentioned in the video clip from the speed test, the Lynx could feel kind of jerky in the torque sensing mode, almost like it was too sensitive. I just wrapped up a review for the Troxus Trax LT that had the same ability, and that bike didn't have this issue, so I'd encourage Troxus to model the Lynx's feel after the Trax. That aside, I really liked that this bike had turn signals, which really go a long way towards safety. I was also happy to see a color display, and I thought the bike was very comfortable to ride. There's also the utility factor of this bike with its high weight rating and its heavy-duty cargo rack. The range of accessories Troxus offers for the bike is relatively small, but I do think its power is appropriate to move some extra weight around. I've got to say, having ridden BMX many years ago, the Lynx Plus definitely took me back. It's not every day we see e-bikes of this style, although I think this one proved that they definitely have their place. And I've also got to say that we've generally been really impressed with this second generation of Troxus bikes. We tested some of their first models in early 2023, and they did a solid job, but I think the brand really raised the bar with these new models. My takeaway from the Lynx Plus is that it's a pretty unique little bike because of its size and feel. I don't think it's likely to be the best fit for everyone because of those things, but I do think it should appeal to younger audiences, and I think it would work really well for commuting to work or school, running some errands here and there, cruising around the neighborhood with friends, or all three if you consider how much range this thing has. I had a lot of fun with this bike's speed and power, and I liked that it was really versatile with the ability to switch between sensor modes. Was this feature perfect? Well, not quite, but I think I'd still rather have a slightly jerky ride than not have the ability at all. Bottom line, if you're looking for a fun bike that feels really energized and powerful without taking itself too seriously, I think you'll have a lot of fun with the Lynx Plus. Its size can be a bit misleading in both the amount of punch it has and how heavy it is, so do keep those things in mind, but if you're considering this as an option, I don't think you'll be disappointed. If you want to take a closer look, please be sure to use our affiliate link in the video description to head over to the Troxus website. You can also use the second link there to see our written review at electricbikereport.com. If you enjoyed this video, please help us appease the YouTube algorithm by liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing this with your friends. But thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Again, I'm John with Electric Bike Report, and this is the Troxus Lynx Plus.